ReZero Web Novel Volume 30. Things keep heating up in Wallachia as Vincent fights the Great Disaster, aka the giant black goo, with the physically and emotionally stunted children by his side, and meanwhile in Guaral, Priscilla, with her makeshift army of courageous combatants and Heinkel, fights against the dragons. Arc 7 keeps having these very interesting twists, and it's becoming this ever-increasing web of interconnected storylines and references, and I don't know where all of this is going, but I am very excited for it. And once again I must mention, initially I said this in Arc 5 when Priscilla busted out the Yang sword, and at the beginning of Arc 7, but it is becoming ever more pronounced that the X stories are mandatory reading. You think you can enjoy your peak without homework? Ha! Think again. There's nothing extra or side about them anymore, especially in Arc 7. In this volume in particular, if you haven't read, for example, X1 and X4, some of the reveals don't even hit as hard because you don't even know what's being talked about. Even X1 becomes relevant in this volume, something I certainly did not expect so soon in the story. I expected X1 to come up whenever we do address the whole Felt Royal Lugunica Kingdom storyline, but here it's become relevant already. Remember Miles? Well, he's back. In a flashback. He's not actually back. I mean, he fought Reinhardt. He never had a chance. And I'll be honest, when I read X1, I was not particularly impressed. It is still one of the X stories I like the least, and part of that was also because of Miles. He didn't really seem like an imposing character, more like a generic goon villain, but I think at some point in time, I will reread X1 now with fresh eyes and a lot more information and context surrounding these characters. And it's hard to know in these long-running series which characters to get emotionally attached to, because a lot of times many characters in storylines just get forgotten by the authors. I'm sure you've seen it a million times. But I think the author of ReZero does a tremendous job at keeping almost everybody relevant in the story somehow, which is super impressive for a cast this big. I still can't believe that the Three Stooges from Arc 1 came back as actual full-fledged characters and not just a simple comic relief moment. That was super surprising to me. I still wonder how that happened, and it just makes me hopeful that we will see the Apple guy again. And I know that most of you web novel readers are traumatized and you don't like her, but trust me, and you know this as well, we will be seeing Liliana again and it's going to be great. Now let's dive right into volume 30, and instead of talking about the characters that are in this book, we are going to talk about the one that's not. Yes, the missing Subaru in the room, our protagonist that may or may not be responsible for a world-ending calamity. Ha ha ha, fun stuff. Unless my old age is getting to me and I'm forgetting something obvious, this is the first volume in the main story to have almost no Subaru. And obviously I'm not counting Arc 6 Amnesia Subaru as a different character. I've said my opinion on that already. Our protagonist only has a single line of dialogue in this entire volume, and I quote, "Wow, so insightful." That's certainly less verbose than Subaru usually is, but I'll take it. And in case I goofed up and he does have more lines of dialogue, I guess my bad. I make these notes at 1 in the morning, half asleep, so please forgive me. Now, to put your main character on the shelf for an entire volume is a very daring writing decision, and I have mixed thoughts on this. Let's start with the positive. Like I mentioned in many past reviews, one of the things I like so much about ReZero is how good the secondary cast is. There's so many characters that I enjoy in ReZero, and so many different types, like characters I want to root for, like Emilia and Ram, and even newer characters like Flop, characters that are mysterious and I want to know more about, like Al for example, characters that are strong and impactful and leave an impression on you and you just want to see more from them, like Madelyn or Yorna, and then characters that are slightly obnoxious sometimes but are still so overwhelmingly entertaining that I want to see more from them, like Vincent and the Queen of Controversy herself, Priscilla. The cast for ReZero is goated, and there are so many characters that a lot of fans can say, that's my favorite character, and I'll be like, yep, checks out, that makes sense. By taking the point of view away from Subaru, which is something the author has done many times with named chapters, it allows for these secondary characters to have more of a spotlight on them when they could otherwise be overshadowed by our main character. It's the same reason why I enjoyed the X story so much, because the cast in ReZero is so deep, giving the spotlight to the secondary characters usually delivers. With the exception of Liliana. Okay, that's the obligatory Liliana joke, okay? It's topical, Arc 5 is coming out right now in adaptation, just whatever, let's move on. Even if the situation is dire, or perhaps because the situation is so dire, it's super fun to see how these characters react and what they do without the help from Subaru, the guy who has impressively accurate instincts for what to do. I wonder how he does it. Having said all this, while the cast for ReZero is goated, so is our main character. Like I said many times, Subaru is one of my all-time favorite characters, and it just doesn't feel the same without him. And I don't know why I'm sounding so emotional saying this. It seems like I'm speaking fondly about some ex-partner, and before some dude in the comments, "You're sounding kinda sussy, bro." Let's move on. I said in my last review that Volume 29 was my favorite volume in Arc 7 up until that point, and after reading Volume 30, that still holds true. I enjoyed Volume 30, yes, but it just didn't hit as hard. I still prefer Volume 29. I love underdog stories and stories of perseverance, which is why I resonate with ReZero so much. Some of my favorite movies of all time are stuff like 127 Hours and The Revenant. I'm just a weird dude. But and also me as a reader, the connection that I have with Subaru by this point cannot be easily replicated with any other character. So reading this volume, yes, it was good, but I did miss him. To put it into perspective though, Arc 7 is a long arc and ReZero is a long series, so I don't think it's a detriment to the story to put our main character away for what I'm assuming is a short while. So I'm a bit torn on this. On one hand, I did enjoy the volume and I think it's worthwhile to highlight the rest of the cast. I do think it's a worthwhile decision in the long run that will pay off. However, reading this volume, I think Subaru's absence was very noticeable. So let me know in the comments if you miss Subaru or if you just don't care at all. I'm assuming that he's back by next volume, so I'm guessing it's not that big of a deal. Now, moving on to our dark-haired, masked man Vincent, or should I say Abel, because the fake, real Vincent is right beside him, barking orders at the same time. It can get confusing even for a reader. This was a very good highlight volume for Vincent, and he's similar to Subaru in a sense that he's not a very strong fighter himself. In fact, Priscilla seems to be the stronger young sword user, which is just bizarre. They tease that Vincent has some sort of mysterious reason as to why he doesn't use it, but they haven't explained it yet. With the flame of the yang sword, even that great disaster's existence would, I have no intention of drawing it out. However, Abel's answer to Yorna's appeal was not the one she had hoped for. So Vincent's winning conditions are much similar to Subaru in the sense that it's not so much about his personal agency, but more about positioning the right pieces in the right places. In this case specifically to convince Yorna to discard the Demon City in order to save its inhabitants. The contrast between Vincent and Subaru's methods is super funny though. Throughout the series we have seen many times that Subaru is someone who appeals at empathy, at relatability. Subaru is someone who almost weaponizes his own weakness. We saw this more notably in Arc 4 when he convinces Beatrice to take his hand, and in Arc 5 when he does his big speech. Vincent is the exact opposite and I love it. He's someone who appeals at logic only, no emotion. He will make strong arguments and will make you agree with him despite him being perhaps a bit too abrasive and insensitive at times. He's someone who always carries the burden and the pride of an emperor at all times. Even in a situation like this, he doesn't even say please. He would never say or do something that makes him appear weak. Him convincing Yorna is super funny because it pretty much boils down to him saying, "Hey, you know I'm right, stop being so emotional, just do what I say and stop being dumb." And it just sort of works by the end. The contrast is even funnier because we can very easily imagine if Subaru was here, how he would have persuaded Yorna and how different his methods and his rhetoric would be. The fight against the Great Disaster is relatively unexciting, I would say. I don't know if that's controversial, but there's not really much you can do against the giant goo of obliteration, so it's pretty much just characters saving each other and cooperating with some sweet interactions between a lot of them. For example, I burst out laughing when Al just calls Yorna Fox Babe. Al is just so funny. And then the fight ends when Yarna just decides to unleash her big load on it, and it's just over by that point. As a fan of action, I usually prefer fights like we had in the previous volume or like we also have coming up in this volume, where it's humans or humanoid characters fighting and you can see more of the struggle, of the physical clashes. Still, this fight was fun nonetheless. It gave us some great moments and most importantly, it gave us some huge lore drops that just left my jaw wide open. From tiny tidbits like Al mentioning his parents, which I did not expect and unfortunately adds yet more fuel to the Subaru is Al theory, which I don't like, but it is what it is, to bigger things like Vincent stating that the giant great disaster has at least the will of Subaru even if it may not be him necessarily, and we can see that this is proven by the fact that the giant goo only tries to attack those that Subaru likes and sort of stays away from Vincent because he's just obnoxious. This is extremely interesting because we've seen the giant black goo at least 2 times in the series, one back in Arc 4 when Subaru broke the taboo inside of Echidna's dream castle, and another one in Arc 6 which is presumed to be because of those mysterious underground doors filled with miasma which we never really knew much about them. I'm guessing we will at some point in the future, but both of those times the giant black goo was something external to Subaru, not him himself. Both times the giant shadowy disaster was presumed to be Satella, and here it is Subaru, and that is so strange because what triggered it? Was his body growing again? Why would that have an effect on whatever curse or authority is doing this? It's just so strange, and to make matters worse, it appears that a lot of characters have information that they're not sharing. For example, after defeating it, Al casually states that he believes that Subaru is still alive because the world has not been destroyed. Huh? This is fascinating because number one, it directly contradicts Echidna's parallel world theory, which, let's be honest, it's probably for the best. Subaru left so many crappy worlds behind, it's probably the best that's not a real thing. And number two, what does Al know? Bro, talk to me, you can talk, just let me know what's in your brain. Vincent also subscribes to the idea that Subaru is still alive because apparently he still has a part to play against the Great Disaster, something that Vincent has been hinting at since volume 26. And it is still unclear what this role is, but he says that the next step in his master plan is to frame Subaru as his illegitimate son. What? First of all, in Arc 7, Subaru has cross-dressed as a woman, been turned into a child, and now is being given the title of bastard son. These are a lot of keywords that would be highly suspicious on any browser history. And second of all, is there any guarantee that Subaru is still in child form? Because didn't Olbart try to dispel that? Because if he's no longer a child and he has his adult body, then the whole plan just falls apart. Against all of your guys' recommendations and my own better judgment, I went into the wiki again while dodging spoilers like I'm in the Matrix, like about section, summary, and all I wanted to know was the ages. And Vincent is apparently 26-27 and Subaru is 18, so nani? So if Subaru's body is back to normal, then the math does not compute on that one. The whole plan just doesn't make sense because I don't care how much of a stallion Vincent is, you cannot reproduce at that age, okay? It's just you need the thing to drop and you learn that in school, you know what I'm talking about. The other mega lore drop is Taritta's commandment, which on a personal note will make it super fun whenever I read volume 26 of the light novel, so I'm thankfully going through the web novel first, which will allow me on the second read to pick up on all of these cool details. Her backstory adds a whole new dimension to the Taritta character, and also in this volume she chose not to act on her commandment, which, if it truly is a predestined thing, then is it really a choice or is she just delaying the inevitable? I'm really enjoying this theme of destiny that is present in this arc. We know that the authors sometimes like to center story arcs around certain themes. For example, Arc 4 was centered around bonds and promises, Arc 6 was centered around memories, and now Arc 7 seems to be centered around destiny. I personally love the theme of destiny, and I'm particularly curious how it's going to play out by the bastard father and son duo of Vincent and Subaru, because for Daddy Vincent, apparently his destiny tells him that his very existence goes against the empire that he's trying to protect, so that's quite a conundrum. And for Subaru, an unavoidable destiny seems like the perfect meta obstacle for a character who can reset and go back in time, so I'm super hyped for all of this. And I do hope and expect that we do get some cool character development for Taritta, as her character seems to be perfect with her commandment that she doesn't want to follow through, and also her sense of insecurity and inferiority as the new chieftain of the Shudrak. I think that she's the perfect character to be able to surpass her destiny. Now, I do have an endless amount of notes and I still want to sleep today, so let's flip over to Guaral, where we have the unlikely duo of Ice and Fire against the Dragon Lolly. Emilia is back, baby! Yeah! And it sure is a shame that she didn't bring her newly captured Pokemon. That would have been very useful. This was legitimately a huge surprise for me, because you guys know that I've spoiled some things for myself, whether reading the wiki, making research for these videos, or just browsing social media where the evil algorithms know that I like ReZero, and then they're like, hey man, here's some Arc 8 spoilers, we think you'll like this. Thanks. And also I made the very regrettable decision of making an X account, and I just read something about a black hole before my superior caffeinated reflexes just closed down the tab, never to be seen again. I greatly appreciate all of the ReZero community and people that post about ReZero and love ReZero, it's super cool, but some of you guys are a risky follow, that's all I'm gonna say. Back to the topic, I hadn't spoiled that Emilia came back in Arc 7, so this truly caught me off guard. I was super sure in my mind for some reason that this was going to be a Whole Cake Island type arc. In case you're not familiar with One Piece, I thought this was going to be one of those story arcs where members of the main crew are not present for a while. I certainly didn't expect to see Emilia back so soon. I thought that we would see her in a sort of status update as to what's going on in Lugunica, or that we would see her in Arc 8 at the earliest. Her back and forth with Priscilla is partly amusing but also partly annoying, because I thought that Priscilla would have gained some respect for her after the events of Arc 5, but unfortunately that does not appear to be the case. Even Emilia, who's so sweet, just calls out Priscilla for being so mean towards her, and I just wish that Emilia learned some comeback game from Subaru so that she could go tit for tat with Priscilla. Tit for tat for tat, or maybe not tit for tit with Priscilla, that would not end up well. Also, one of these interactions remind me of a personal anecdote when Priscilla says that Emilia is an enemy, and Emilia replies, "Wow, I didn't even know you thought of me as an enemy." Even though it's supposed to be an insult, she was almost kind of flattered, and it reminded me of when I first started this channel. One of the first mean comments that I ever got was someone saying, "This dumb YouTuber doesn't know what he's talking about." And I was almost flattered because I thought to myself, wow, he thinks I'm a YouTuber, that's so cool. Anyway, the Fire and Ice duo versus Madelyn is just incredible. I love the choreography, it's super gritty. Priscilla even uses some of the ice swords that Emilia produces, so even though they do not seem to get along super well in terms of personality, they have tremendous teamwork for people who have never teamed up before. And also Madelyn just uses Hyper Beam at the end, so this is one of those fights that whenever the anime does get to this point, I hope it does, I just want to see this fight animated because it's going to be glorious. In the middle of all of this, we also discover that Priscilla can use the soul marriage technique, which is very interesting to me because for that technique you need to love someone, and I didn't even know that Priscilla had a heart. She does say she's the original and not really the same thing as Yorna, so we still don't know what that is, but all we know is that the Wallachian siblings are hiding a lot of secrets. I love the mix between gripping action and compelling character moments on the Guaral side of the conflict, and we had a lot of good character moments, not just for our royal candidates. Petra was briefly mentioned as helping with the negotiations to smuggle them into the Empire, which is just super cool character growth to see. And then Rem. Rem was tremendous in this volume, and I love her very amusing relationship with Priscilla. Those two hit it off super well, and it was super unexpected. I still don't like that Priscilla is essentially teaching her healing magic by just yapping, 100% confidence, 0% knowledge, but she just yaps so confidently that it's helping Ram somehow. Priscilla is just a scam life coach and it's working. And Ram had the very bold and pragmatic move of gambling Flop's life in exchange for the safety of Guaral when speaking to Madelyn. And for a character like Ram, who was known for her impulsivity and making very rash decisions, this moment is just so gangster. We can see that Rem is still Rem, she's still very kind-hearted, and there's this continuous idea in ReZero that despite memories, there's still the core of a person that never really changes. But here we can see that despite Rem being so kind-hearted, she's now growing up on the mean streets of Wallachia, and she's getting hardened and more powerful and somebody you do not mess with. And speaking of somebody you do not mess with, Flop continues impressing me. Not only is he auto levels of bro, which is one of the highest compliments I could possibly give, he's also very smart. Even if he's a non-combatant, he's still braver than Heinkel, which, yes, I know, low bar to clear, bro was really hyping me up, I was getting excited for Heinkel, hey, maybe he redeemed himself, but no, back to being a loser very quickly. It is what it is. You have some rotten apples in the family tree, it happens. Not only was Flop very impressive with his performance and his pragmatism of telling Rem to use him as a bargaining chip, but also apparently he knew all along who Vincent was and that he was the one responsible for what happened to Balleroy, his childhood friend. So, what is even Flop's endgame? He seems to be too kind-hearted to have some sort of Machiavellian scheme, and he also doesn't seem to be driven by revenge like Madelyn, for example. So, what does he want? What is his endgame? And that bombshell at the end, it was like the final line in the book, and it just was perfect. Perfect cliffhanger to end the volume. So overall, while this wasn't my favorite volume, I still think it was a very good volume with some huge lore drops and some great action moments that kept me gripped throughout. I have no idea how we're 7 story arcs and over 30 volumes in, and we are still getting teased for things to come in the future, and I'm still so hyped for everything. It's just mind-blowing. ReZero is incredible. I will say about the volume as a whole though that this is definitely one of those volumes that feels like this is the web novel, and what I mean by this is it feels like the rough draft and not the finished product. Some sections of this volume bounced all over the place. You went from Taritta to Vincent to Yarna to Taritta's flashback, now we're back to Al. I think that this will probably be better structured in the light novel and better streamlined for a more coherent reading experience. Like I mentioned, I really enjoyed the characters in volume 30, but I do think that Subaru's absence was felt. And once again, maybe I'm just a Subaru fanboy and I don't know what the consensus of the community is, but to me it was noticeable. 5 volumes in, and I keep waiting for this bad thing to happen because I know that some people don't like Arc 7, but up until now I'm really enjoying it. It's good. So let me know your thoughts about volume 30 in the comment section below. Follow me, links in the description, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and ciao!